Have you ever asked yourself how entire societies, sometimes educated and modern, can fall under the spell of oppressive regimes? How can large groups of people willingly surrender freedom, support harmful ideologies, or ignore injustice, often without realizing it? The answer isn't always about politics or power. Sometimes it's about psychology. Deep, invisible forces are at work in the human mind and group behavior. Welcome back to Psyche Unveiled. This video explores the psychology behind totalitarianism and mass formation, a concept introduced by psychologist 𝐬𝐿. Mass formation is a psychological process where large groups of people start to think and act in the same way, almost hypnotically. It doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly. According to 𝐬𝐿, 4 conditions must be present. 1. Social isolation. People feel disconnected from one another. 2. Lack of purpose. Many feel that their lives lack meaning. 3. Free-floating anxiety. A background sense of fear, but no clear source. 4. Frustration and aggression. Emotions build up, waiting to be directed. When these feelings are widespread, people become vulnerable. They crave a sense of belonging, a clear answer, and a group to attach to. When a compelling narrative comes along, especially one that offers an enemy to blame or a solution to follow, people grab onto it, even if it's irrational or harmful. Most people don't join mass movements because they're brainwashed or evil. They join because they're human. When life feels confusing or out of control, the desire for certainty becomes stronger than the need for truth. Belonging becomes more important than logic. Once someone is part of a group that seems to make sense of their fear or isolation, it's hard to walk away. Mass formation gives people a sense of identity. They feel seen, they feel like they matter, and they begin to defend the narrative, even if it means turning against facts, friends, or even family. A recent example is what happened around COVID. A clear division of us versus them around vaccination was created and generated a lot of hatred. Then there is psychology. It explains that our minds are full of shortcuts called cognitive biases. These are mental habits that help us make quick decisions, but they can also lead us astray. Confirmation bias. We seek out information that agrees with what we already believe. In-group bias. We trust people in our group more than outsiders. Authority bias. We trust leaders or experts, even without questioning. In a state of mass formation, these biases get stronger. Logic takes a back seat. People stop questioning and start following. In the digital age, if you want to see mass formation in action, you don't need to look at a dictatorship. Just open your phone. Social media was supposed to connect us, and it has. But it's also created the perfect breeding ground for psychological manipulation. Algorithms don't reward truth. They reward engagement. And engagement often comes from outrage, fear, or tribal loyalty. The more extreme or emotional a post is, the more likely it is to be shared. This creates echo chambers, where you're surrounded by people who think exactly like you, reinforcing your beliefs over and over again. At first, this feels validating, like you're finally seeing the truth. But over time, it starts to feel like the only truth. Dissenting opinions seem not just wrong, but dangerous. People who disagree are no longer just mistaken. They're enemies. Sound familiar? Propaganda does too. Take a look at how certain products or lifestyles are promoted. Constant ads tell us we're not happy, not healthy, not attractive. But hey, here's a product that can fix that. We begin to live in bubbles where we see the same solutions offered for problems we didn't even know we had. We start to feel broken just by scrolling. Or look at how violence is normalized in entertainment. Endless images of aggression, betrayal, and infidelity presented not as troubling, but as exciting, even glamorous. Over time, we stop questioning it. We internalize it. We might even begin to accept it as just how the world works. And let's not forget how political ideologies use echo chambers too. Platforms amplify certain voices while suppressing others, often under the guise of safety or community standards. But what happens when only one narrative is allowed to grow? It's not debate anymore. It's programming. The scariest part? Most of the time, We don't even realize it's happening. So here's the takeaway. Not all manipulation looks like control, not all conformity feels like pressure, and not all propaganda waves a flag. Sometimes it comes in the form of a trending video, a relatable meme, or a lifestyle ad that tells you who you should be. To break free, we need awareness, and we need diversity of thought. Because when we only hear one voice, even if it sounds like truth, we risk falling asleep at the wheel. To truly grasp how mass formation works in real life, we don't need to look far back in history. From totalitarian regimes to modern media narratives, the patterns are alarmingly familiar. Let's start with one of the most chilling examples: Nazi Germany. Hitler didn't seize control with brute force alone. He offered people a sense of identity, certainty, and unity in the midst of deep economic despair and cultural confusion. The propaganda machine painted the world in black and white, good and evil. Dissenters weren't just disagreeable, they were dangerous. But this didn't happen overnight. It began with fear, it spread through repetition, and it fed on a very human need: to belong to something bigger than ourselves. That's the heart of mass formation. It doesn't just suppress critical thinking, it replaces it with emotional bonding. Fast forward to the Cold War era. Communist regimes across the Eastern Bloc operated similarly. Mass rallies, patriotic songs, mandatory slogans. It wasn't just about control, it was about molding minds through repetition and emotional reinforcement. Now let's move closer to the present. Remember the tobacco industry? For decades, powerful companies spent fortunes convincing people that smoking was healthy, even glamorous. When health data began to emerge, they used disinformation and scientific experts to sow doubt. Their solution? Light cigarettes, safer-sounding brands. They created the problem and then sold us the fix. And it doesn't stop there. Think about the alcohol industry. Ads show fun, connection, and sex appeal. But what's rarely shown is the fallout: addiction, broken families, and mental health issues. As more people become dependent, more products emerge: hangover cures, detox kits, and alcohol-free versions. Again, we have to ask, is the same industry feeding the illness and the remedy? How about Big Pharma? While many medications save lives, we also see cycles where new disorders are heavily marketed, followed by patented treatments. It begs the question, are we being made to feel sick so we can be sold the cure? Even the beauty and wellness industry plays a role. You're told you're not enough. Too old, too wrinkled, too tired, too messy. But guess what? There's a serum, a program, or a supplement to fix it. And the cycle continues. Manufactured insecurity, manufactured solution. So here's the real question. What industries today are profiting from keeping us in a state of fear, confusion, or dependence? And more importantly, what happens when we stop accepting the solutions they offer and start questioning the problems they define for us? History shows that the most dangerous part of mass formation isn't just the power at the top. It's the participation from below. When people stop questioning, stop observing, and start obeying in the name of safety or unity, we all pay the price. The hidden lesson is this: mass control doesn't always come with a boot on your neck. Sometimes it comes with a smile, a slogan, or a solution for a problem you didn't know you had. Staying awake in the face of mass formation isn't just about being smart or educated. It's about being aware, actively, intentionally, and consistently. In societies where groupthink dominates and dissent is often frowned upon, real freedom begins with how we choose to think. One of the most important things we can do is diversify our sources of information. Mass formation thrives when people are exposed only to a single narrative, often repeated through mainstream media, popular influencers, or social institutions. That's not to say every mainstream source is inherently misleading, but when it becomes the only voice we hear, it limits our ability to think critically. So how do we break out of this? We learn to listen to voices outside the echo chamber. Independent journalists, unpopular thinkers, historians, psychologists, now whistleblowers. Even if we don't agree with them, the very act of considering alternative viewpoints sharpens our mental flexibility. It creates space for dialogue instead of division. This doesn't mean we should believe everything we read online. But it does mean we need to develop discernment. It is important to keep asking questions and cross-checking facts, asking who benefits from the information we're given, wondering what's not being said and why. We also need to stay connected to each other, not just digitally, but emotionally and spiritually. Authoritarian systems depend on isolation. The more disconnected people feel, the more vulnerable they become to mass thinking. That's why building strong personal relationships, open discussions, and supportive communities is essential. In a strange twist, true resistance often looks like genuine connection. Finally, self-awareness is key. We all want certainty, especially in chaotic times. But the moment we start craving simple answers to complex problems, we become easier to influence. Mass formation feeds on that craving. The antidote is to stay curious, even when it's uncomfortable. Ask questions, be okay with not knowing, and always stay open to revising what you believe as you learn more. Because in the end, the most powerful form of freedom isn't just external, it's internal. The ability to stay awake, even when the world is asleep. 𝐬𝐻⁴ work reminds us that totalitarianism doesn't always show up with boots and guns. Sometimes it comes with hashtags and slogans. It comes dressed as unity, safety, or progress. That's why we need critical thinking, connection, courage, not just to avoid the past, but to create a future where freedom is built on awareness, not fear. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, consider liking and subscribing. Let's keep this conversation going, because society doesn't change until we do. We'll see you in the next video.